to support the oppressed. And today, you know, we had one of the daughters of these martyred commanders saying that, you know what, if we know that you will kill us and then you will burn our bodies, we will continue to stand behind our leader and we will continue to fight, because our leader is the Imam Hussein of our time, and we're not going to leave our leaders alone as they pursue the path of justice, righteousness, and you know, the path that can lead to our independence and our freedom for years to come. And so this is what, you know, a lot of people see nowadays. And this is what, of course, as you said, you know, they're perhaps envious. They would like to do that. And the message is that, of course, one could say Iranians are built different because of what they have had to face, and the Yemenis are built different, and the Lebanese are built different, and the Palestinians are built different. But the fact of the matter is, everyone in our audience, every single one of you, have the power to resist. It doesn't matter how much money, it doesn't even necessarily matter what kind of specialty, education, what tools you have at your disposal. What matters is to have a strong ideology for resistance and to be willing to give your all for the sake of what is right. So if you're courageous, you can also stand up to the Americans, to its Israeli proxies, the way Iranians have stood up, the way Yemenis have stood up, the way the Lebanese and Palestinians and Syrians and every resistance in our region and Iraqi brothers, the way everyone has stood up to the Western imperialism. There is no superiority between the people. The only superiority, as God said, is with the righteous. If you are righteous, doesn't matter your skin color, your nationality, your background, you can be a true Christian and support resistance. You can be a true Jew and support resistance. You can be a true Muslim and support resistance. And so long as you use the tools that God has put at your disposal, every one of you can present and show the resistance that Iranians have been showing.
Thank you, Mayam. Let us bring in Gisu Misha Ahmadi, a reporter on the ground, in a phone conversation. Gisu, I can see that the caravan of the Martyrs of Mightiness is approaching Azadari Square more than 4 hours into this ceremony. Tell us about what you're seeing.
Absolutely, you're right, Bahman. Iran's capital is witnessing a day that will echo for generations in the nation's historical memory. Since the early hours, almost before dawn, mourners have been flowing steadily into the main square of Tehran, the iconic Manqabat Square, which was the main vantage point from which the procession began its route towards Azadari Square. It was interesting to see that people came from every class, every neighborhood, every ethnicity. I talked to people who were here from the Kurdish population of Iran. I saw people representing the Azari population of Iran. I talked to people representing the Bakhtiyari nomads of Iran. Everyone was present here. The magnitude of today's event is simply difficult to describe, Bahman. And it is also very important to know that families, students, elderly, veterans of the Iran-Iraq conflict, everyone was here today, everyone. And now, as we get closer to Azadari Square, we're almost very close to the iconic Azadari Square now, from which the remains of the martyrs will be taken to their final resting place. All I can say is that the convergence in this ceremony is very difficult to describe, as it simply shows how united the entire Iranian nation is. The fact that you see the people from all walks of life holding pictures of leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. People with different political views holding this picture and saying that this man is our leader and we will continue to move forward under his guidance, and we will stand till our very last breath, until our very last drop of blood. This is very significant, Bahman, and if we want to compare this to any of the other huge rallies taking place in Iran, well, I can tell you for sure, I've been covering such rallies for more than 20 years, and I've never seen a rally of people of this magnitude, particularly in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Now, let's not forget that it's also the second day of the holy month of Muharram. This is a time when Muslims, and particularly Shia Muslims, focus more on the events of the Battle of Karbala, and they mourn the loss and the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, which is seen as a role model. And let's not forget, heroes, national heroes like Haj Qasem Soleimani have described the Iranian nation as the nation of Imam Hussein. That's a direct quote, that we are a nation of Imam Hussein, which means that we will stand up for what is right till our very last drop of blood. And what you see here today, the images that our viewers are watching from their screens, clearly is a testimony to that the level of solidarity, the unity among the Iranian people, which of course is something that was questioned by mainstream media and those who would want to undermine the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is a show of force, Bahman, more than anything. It is a show of force in the face of a triumph against the Israeli aggression. Clearly, they did not expect to get such a harsh response from the Iranians, and they had to eventually give in and try to bring an end to the missiles that were being dropped on their cities. They clearly did not know what Iran's military might is and the extent of it. And of course, now Iranian people are saying that they are so proud of the armed forces and those who sacrificed their lives to show how mighty Iran is. And of course, it will always use this might to be the voice of the voiceless, to be the voice of the oppressed, those nations and those people that do not get to have a say when their rights are being completely undermined, particularly people like the people of Palestine, the people in Gaza right now. It's interesting to see that the people are not only holding the flags of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I've also seen the flag of Gaza being tied to the flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this, again, is another demonstration of solidarity with the oppressed people of Gaza, and the fact that Iranians will never stop supporting the oppressed people around the world. And of course, in our day and age, the people of Gaza are clearly the people who are being oppressed. They have to face egregious atrocities committed by the Israeli regime, and unfortunately, in the face of the silence, the complete silence of all world powers, all those who claim the advocates of human rights, you see that they have remained silent against, despite the images that are coming out of Gaza of the atrocities committed by the Israeli regime. And of course, it was not a surprise for Iranians, considering this track record that the Israelis have, to see the same level of silence and indifference, and in the case of Western powers, support for the Israeli regime for its acts of aggression against Iranian people. You know that there were lots of women and children who were killed. Residential areas were targeted by the Israeli regime. We do know that there are, according to the statistics that the Ministry of Health has released, there were about 50 women and 2 expecting mothers and 13 children that were killed during these acts of aggression. This is something that has really outraged Iranians. Of course, they do offer their support for the armed forces, and of course, they are mourning the loss of those who sacrificed their lives for the victory and for the triumph of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the part that is totally unacceptable, and it is against all the conventions, the Geneva Convention, and of course humanitarian law, international humanitarian laws and regulations, is the fact that hospitals, residential areas, schools, mosques, these are places that should not be targeted in any kind of conflict. And while we have clearly seen that the Iranian Red Crescent Society has been targeted, they lost 3 of their 8 workers that were martyred. About 50 of them were injured in these attacks. Also, ambulances were targeted, hospitals were targeted. We even went to a few of the hospitals that had become a target of the Israeli attacks in Tehran, Nabahi-Nejad Hospital in the east of the capital, and also Motahari Hospital, which is towards the west. These are 2 hospitals that had to have their patients relocated to other hospitals because of the level of damage by the Israeli regime. So all of that is summed up in what you see in the images today, and the people of Iran are united, and they're sending a strong message of solidarity and unity to the people, to everyone who is watching, to the people of the world, and to the leaders and all of those who are trying to portray it differently, all of those who are trying to hide behind fake news and try to show things differently as they are. The images today speak for themselves, Bahman.
Right, Gisu. Well, of course, as the caravan is approaching Azadari Square, and this, as like you said, this is a show of force, this united front by the people of Iran. If Iran decides to continue the negotiations with the US with another round or 2, how do you think this event is going to influence the future of those negotiations?
Well, clearly this time around, Iran, as it's going to the negotiation table, it has a very different stance. It is coming from a stance of strength, of the strength that it has gained, not just from its military might, which has surprised and shocked world powers, and it has encouraged so many oppressed nations as they were watching their screens to see how Iran will respond to the Israeli aggression, and the joy that we saw coming from the parts of these people as they were watching the response of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it is not just Iran's military might, but now look at this show of unity, the solidarity of Iranians, all walks of life, from all religions, all ethnicities, who have come together now, and they are showing the entire world, and particularly those who want to negotiate with Iran, where Iran stands right now. So this time when Iran goes to the negotiating table, it has a lot more options than it used to.
Thank you, Gisu. Another question I wanted to ask you, of course, in the procession of this funeral, there was a different lorry dedicated to the children who were martyred and unjustly killed, assassinated by the Israeli regime. Also another one dedicated to the ladies, and that was indeed sad. We could see, and of course, the sight of the water cannons shows how hard, what a scorcher today is, but this has not stopped crowds in the tens of thousands to get together to show their solidarity and support for their beloved commanders and also countrymen and women.
And I cannot emphasize enough the magnitude of the crowd today, despite the scorching heat. Well, it is the first week of summer, and it is very hot fought in the Iranian capital. So the fact that you see so many people have turned out, that is because they really know how important it is and how their presence can actually have an important effect on the message that Iran is trying to send to the entire world. And that is why we know how important it is to be present today in this rally. And of course, as we get closer to Azadari Square, it's interesting to see that the crowd has become even more dense. It seems that more people have gathered here. I'm getting closer to Azadari Square right now, and I hope that I can send you some live images from where I am so that you can see. And like you mentioned yourself, the number of women and children that were martyred in the Israeli aggression is something that has touched the hearts of many. It has broken the hearts of many. We see entire families. You're mentioning women and children, Bahman, but I would like to point out that in many cases we have entire families that were martyred because their homes were targeted. And this is something that is not just unacceptable, it is a huge red line when it comes to international rules and regulations.
Well, thank you so much, Gisumi Shahmadi, our reporter underground, for reporting on this sacred occasion. Thank you so much. I have now Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh on a phone conversation with us. He's a political commentator. Mr. Gholamzadeh, very good to have you on this live coverage. What do you think is the message of this huge crowd that gathered today in solidarity with our beloved commanders?
Thank you very much for having me. I actually just returned from the ritual and ceremony, and it was very crowded. It took me actually a very long time to be able to get back to my office. I think that just like all the other previous demonstrations that Iranians have turned out massively in millions or hundreds of thousands of people, the event today was also another moment where the Iranians gathered. But this time, the difference is that I hope that the Americans and the Israelis and the Westerners would look at the images more carefully in order to have a better understanding from the Iranian nation. They had this miscalculation that as quote-unquote Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, 80% of Iranians are against the Islamic Republic. And now we can see on the street people from all walks of life, from all generations, all ages, have turned out to the streets, have come there, and I was witnessing them. Different people were mourning these commanders, these martyrs, these scientists, and these civilians who have been martyred by the Zionist regime. So this is the reality of the Iranian nation. I hope that this time they can believe the images and don't turn their eyes from the things and correct their understanding from who this society and community is. Iranians are actually, their flesh and blood are mixed with the spirituality and the religion. They have been raised by Islamic teaching. And part of this Islamic teaching is martyrdom and sacrificing themselves for the objective and the goal that they have, the divine goal that they have. And in that path, martyrdom not only is not a threat, it's not a damage, it's actually an honor for every family, for every person to be martyred or to have some martyrs in the families. And this can be seen, just a moment of that, a glimpse of that can be seen in the images that were depicted this morning, and it is actually now going on the streets around the Azadari Square in the city of Tehran. Yesterday we had in Mashhad, and the other days we are going to have in other cities as well. And in almost all of these cities, we can see massive rallies of people who come to the streets to pay tribute and respect to their martyrs, and to most of all to show the Israelis, the Americans, that they are fighting for their country, they are supporting their country. There are the difference between Iranians and part of the world is that they are a great nation. There are two entities in the world who have been formed by occupying land and forcing the main residents out of the land and then forming a so-called country. The first one was the United States, and second one was the Israeli regime. Both of these regimes were actually formed by occupying land. And many centuries ago, the Americans went and killed many of the indigenous people, so-called Indian Americans. They killed many of them. They displaced many of them, and they sent them out of the land. And then they occupied the land there and formed a country. Now they call it the United States. And nearly 80 years ago, the same people, some sort of same people, displaced people in Palestine and occupied their land and forced the people out of their homes, and then claimed ownership of that land and said that it is what they call it Israel. So these two nations are formed by immigrants, are formed by people who belong to other nations, who belong to other lands, and have gathered here to occupy land. So these two entities do not understand what nationality means, what a united nation means. And it is something that Iranians have realized very well. Iranians have for many centuries, for thousands of years, have been a great nation, a united nation, and they have lived together despite all the differences, ethnicities, in languages, in religion, in everything. Despite all these differences, they have been united around the name of Iran, and that is the nationality that they have. So when Iranians speak about a nation, it means something that they belong to. It's not something that they have occupied. They belong to this land, and they are standing for the country to the last breath, and they will fight for it, whatever it takes. So that is something that the Americans and the Israelis, or even the Europeans, do not understand. The difference of Europeans with Iranians is that they have always followed the law of jungle. They have always thought that the only way to have power is through force, and they have always fought for their food, for their power, for everything. While when Iranians and Easterners had actually civilization, they have been living together in a civilized world in the past. Now those people do not understand what a nation means. So they do not understand what this spirituality of the Iranian nation means. And then that's why they think that by attacking Iranian commanders and martyring Iranian commanders and scientists, then they can frighten Iranians and they would turn against the government, or now on no one would follow the path of Martyrs like Farok Abbas or Tehranchi or the others, and there is going to be no nuclear scientists in Iran anymore because they are afraid of their lives. That's a total myth, and that is some wrong visual thinking that they are following. This event, this incident, this attack that they carried out against Iran is going to encourage many more Iranians to join the academia for nuclear, continuing and empowering the nuclear science in Iran. Many people are going to join IRGC or armed forces to defend the country. And many people are now more than ever before united around the name of Iran and the Islamic Republic of Iran. People have realized that it is not about the structure or the establishment of the government. It is about the whole Iran. They have never wanted a strong Iran to exist in this place. And they are trying to disintegrate it and to divide it into smaller countries where they can appoint puppet regimes. And that is something, some dream that never comes true. And that's the message that the Iranians are just now sending to the whole world. That whatever it takes, whatever it costs, and whatever it comes, Iranians are standing for the country. Iranians are besides their officials, besides their commanders, besides their scientists, besides their establishment, and they are defending their country. That's the meaning of the nation in Iran.
Right, Hamid Reza Mayam Ozache is also with me in the studio. Mayam, with the US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites failing to fully disable operations according to their own news outlets, how is Tehran likely to posture diplomatically moving forward?
Of course, the fact that they failed to disable our nuclear sites does not take away at all from the terrorist attack that they committed on our land. And they have to be punished for that. They have to pay the price for every aggression they commit against the powerful Iranian nation. And that's, so first let's set that aside. And of course, we know that a lot of different entities, media entities, and also the IAEA are actually saying that Iran's facilities are not destroyed, like Trump is basically claiming that they were. And Iran's the head of Iran's atomic agency also said that Iran will actually get back and very soon will resume the process, so that that they have basically done what needs to be done to make sure that the enrichment is continued without delay, and that Iran does have another site that it has already moved its enriched uranium to a third site. So that being aside, that Trump, of course, he has to be punished. The U.S. regime has to be punished for the aggression against Iran. But Iran will continue its enrichment. Iran will continue its nuclear program, and Iran has said that it would do so, of course. And the IAEA also warned against it because, Rafael Grossi, after all of these, because actually in different ways, Rafael Grossi should be considered a war criminal, because when Iran was abiding, first of all, made accusations of Iran's nuclear program, saying that, we suspect the Iran's nuclear program, and facilitated, helped provide an excuse for bombing Iran by the Israeli regime, by the US regime. And not only that, they have the audacity of saying that Iranians should actually declare where their enriched uranium is and should come back to the table of negotiations, which Iran will not negotiate its nuclear technology, most definitely not with those who are silent in the face of genocide by those who hold many nuclear bombs, but then target Iran for its peaceful nuclear program. And so this was going to happen, that Iran was not going to give in to this pressure. And even if Iran does talk about, its nuclear program ever again with these same entities, then Iran will be doing also its own thing. Iran will be basically, as I already said, making sure that Iranians continue to practice their right to nuclear technology, to enrich uranium. We know that Iran has made many different radio medicines. In fact, in some of these medicines, at least in one case, Iran and Germany are the only countries capable of producing this medicine. Iran will get electricity from its nuclear program, and Iran will be needless of any kinds of import soon, because in various ways, in terms of technology, in terms of radio medicines, in terms of use of nuclear technology in its agriculture. Iran will continue to use this technology in the way that its people need most, and whether or not the IAEA and their Israeli masters like it.
Right, well, I'm still also with Hamid Reza Khalajzadeh, political commentator, who is with us in a phone conversation. Hamid Reza, well, how do you think Iran should move forward after this? Because we know that the European troika is kind of in the middle between American pressure and also Iran's defiance of the pressure. How do you think Iran is going to move forward in this negotiations, if it is a possibility to have further negotiations with the West?
First of all, I would say that the greatest loser in this recent incident were the Europeans, because they just witnessed and supported Americans destroy the international regime and international norms, and they killed actually all the international laws and international structures. They abused and exploited IAEA. They have devalued actually the US Security Council. and they have destroyed whatever meaning was considered for the United Nations and international organizations. And that means that the Americans want to dictate the whole world their own wishes and their own will as the new norms of the new global order. And the Europeans are just witnessing this moment. They are just stepping back and looking at the Americans destroying all these norms. And in the near future, they would be the greatest loser, actually, even more than now, because they don't have any resistance or resilience like Iran, and they don't have any power like or dictation like the Americans. So they would be the greatest loser. And they don't have any say in the technological warfare that is going on in the world, and in that sense also they are losing. So with the losers, I don't think there is any grounds for negotiations and cooperation, especially when we see that they have supported actually the attacks by the Israelis and the American regime. The Chancellor of the German Chancellor said that the Israelis are doing the dirty job for us, and he has several times supported the Israeli and American attacks against them. French officials have also supported them. The Americans and the British have also supported the attack. So with the three European countries who are supportive of the Israeli regime, who are proud of defending the Zionist regime against Iranian missiles, and the countries who have been supportive of the Israeli regime throughout these nearly 1.5 years that they have committed genocide in Gaza, and they have killed thousands and thousands of people in Gaza, in Lebanon, in other places, including Iran. Why Iran should negotiate with them? What is the ground for discussing with them? So the Americans are saying that they have obliterated Iranian nuclear facilities and nuclear program, so there is a nuclear issue anymore to discuss it. So what is the ground for talks? The talks needs to be for some purpose, to have some fruits and some results for both sides of the negotiation. And there is nothing in between. With the Europeans, I think the negotiations from the beginning was wrong because they were just puppets to the Americans. Even the previous term of President Trump, when he withdrew from the JCPOA, they were supposed to activate insect mechanism in order to keep the deal alive, and they failed to do so. They talked a lot against President Trump, but they abide by what he said and abided by their dictation. So they are just puppets to the American foreign policy. So there is no need to discuss with them. With the Americans, it was actually the President Trump and his officials that clearly said that the negotiations were trapped for Iran in order to actually play a good cop-bad cop scenario and to offer the carrots of negotiation. And on the other side, they picked up war from the Israeli side, and they tried to deceive us into negotiations so that the Israelis can plan and carry out these strikes because they thought that they can destroy Iran. So with this mindset, I don't think that the negotiations would be any helpful for Iran or for the world. The only thing that, as we have witnessed for the past 2 weeks, the only thing that can be the only negotiation, the only language that the Israelis and the Americans understand is the language of force, the language of missiles that they understood. So it took only this path that they finally stepped back to survive the Israeli regime from the Iranian side. And they talked about the ceasefire and the negotiations. Before that, it was all deception. It was all trap for Iran. But when they saw that Iran is not falling for this trap, when they saw that Iran is resisting against their excessive demands, they decided to attack as the final resort and the final way that they had. And then they saw that Iran is not going to surrender. So when a country asks you to unconditionally surrender, the Americans, you're not going to discuss with them. It is not a negotiation. It would be a dictation. Normally and usually the Americans get to negotiation table to dictate their will. With this situation, if there is any negotiation at this moment, it would mean that Iran is frightened to get to the from more war, and then because of that fear, they have come to the table, which is totally wrong. That was the misinterpretation that they had during the past couple of months when Iran got into the negotiations. Iran accepted to negotiate indirectly with the Americans because it wanted to give diplomacy a chance and to prove to the world that Iran is not a stubborn country. Iran is ready to discuss what is its right, and it is ready to prove to the world, as it has done during the JCPOA, that its nuclear program is peaceful, and there is nothing to hide about that. So instead of desk of a negotiation, they decided to use B-2 bombers and to drop bombs on Fordo and missiles on Natanz and Isfahan. And they now are claiming that the Iranian nuclear program has been obliterated. So if it is obliterated, there is nothing to discuss about that. So I don't think that negotiations and talks means anything, at least for the current time and for the current situation. There are some grounds. If they come to their mind and they come to their logic and they respect Iranian nation, Iranian government, and decide to discuss something with mutual respect. But for the time being, we are far from that moment that they would actually want to have mutual respect for Iran to discuss something real at the table.
Thank you, Hamid Reza. Allow me to continue the conversation with Maryam Aza, my colleague from the newsroom, who is with me in our Tehran studios. Maryam, you heard what Hamid Reza was saying. What about you? What do you think? Is diplomatic resilience and this united show of support from the people enough, or Iran should also pursue and strengthen its missile and nuclear programs as deterrent?
Of course, we understand that the only time that diplomacy can work is if you have some kind of power guaranteeing the effectivity of that diplomacy. So if you do not have missiles to retaliate, no negotiations for stopping war is going to work. They will only not bomb you if you can't hit them back. And so negotiation is really always supported by the battlefront, by the ability to hit, by the ability to retaliate. And we have always known this. This is why, while Iran has been negotiating with the US, of course indirectly, but over the years, it has always developed its military weapons because they understood that we're not talking about a civilized kind of people. We're talking about barbarians, that their only mission is to conquer, to destroy, to kill, and to make sure they're on top in everything it comes, of course, but humanity and morality. And so they're willing to do everything it takes. They're willing to bomb hospitals. They're willing to target ambulances. They're willing to target nuclear scientists and other scientists, like the Iranian scientist that they murdered with 12 members of his family members in the same house. So this is what they do. This is what they have. Nothing stops them from committing these acts of terrorism, except you have some kind of guarantor, and the guarantors clearly, obviously, cannot be international organizations. The guarantor for the safety of our nuclear sites, for instance, was supposed to be the IAEA. And we have, when Iran understood, actually, both through the agency's actions, but also through the classified information it was able to retrieve from the Israeli regime, that they're actually in bed with the Israeli regime. So who is the guarantor to make sure that Americans don't invade us? Who is the guarantor to make sure that they don't hit our nuclear sites? Who is the guarantor to make sure that when Iranian women and children are killed, somebody pays a price for committing that? Somebody pays a price for facilitating it. Somebody pays a price for the targeting of civilians civilians. And so the only guarantor we truly have in the world, we have seen, especially in the last 2 years of this live stream genocide in Gaza, is the power to resist. If you take away those weapons, if you take away Iran's ballistic missile program, there is no guarantor to make sure that any negotiation will succeed. And so this is what they tried, however. So the goal of the Western Hegemonic Front, with enforcing negotiations in other countries that actually have any kind of military capability, is to first disarm that country using negotiations and then turn them into another Libya. And of course, when they're destroyed by America, then you no longer hear about the human rights violations, because now they're owned, because now the US can steal their rich oil. And so this is what we have been facing. And Iran has always known. This is why when Iran was negotiating during the JCPOA, when they started with Iran nuclear program, and then they were talking about Iran's ballistic missiles, and they were saying that Iran should disarm, Iran did not agree. Iran said, this is our red line, we're never going to be disarmed, as is Iran's red line also, to continue to basically support its brothers in resistance in the region, and it will not allow. So what they actually wanted with negotiations was not Iran's nuclear program, because they understood that it's not posing any threat, but they start with Iran's nuclear program, citing concerns over nuclear weapons, which of course they know is senseless, and it has proven to not be the case. But then they go after Iran's ballistic missile program. Then they go after Iran's influence in the region, asking Iran to leave its brothers in resistance defenseless, basically, to not support resistance, and to eventually also be a victim of this, because we realized when the Israeli regime felt that it was done with Gaza, when it felt that it was done with Lebanon, and when we had the fall of Syria, and they bombed every infrastructure in the country, and so they felt that they were done with Syria, then they came after Iran, because this is the plan. And if they were ever capable of actually destroying Iran and partitioning the country as they wish, they would go after other countries, because this is about hegemony. This is about colonialism. It's just a different form. It's a more modern version. It's with the presence of so-called international communities that are supposed to basically put a pretty face on this aggression, so that we see it differently from the massacre of Native Americans by Europeans, that we see it differently from the massacre of Africans by Europeans, that we see it differently from the massacre of Native peoples across the world, because of course this is supposed to look like a new and improved world where we actually have human rights, we actually have a push for democracy, and human rights prevail with the guarantee of international organizations. But if Iran does continue negotiations, as it has continued with the Western regimes, and of course we understand there is no difference between the Europeans or the Americans or the Israelis, and also all of them are supported by the so-called international community. So Iran, even if it does continue with its indirect negotiations with the US, Iran will continue to develop every weapon it needs for retaliation, short of course, of nuclear weapons.
Right, Mayam, thank you. One final question to Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh. Dr. Gholamzadeh, tell me, I want to know your opinion on this, that what will the Iranian resistance during the 12-day war with Israel, the imposed war, I must insist, mean for the future relation of Iran with the global south and also non-allied nations?
It was not only for Iran. Iran was fighting for the whole world, we can say. As I said in the previous question, the Americans are destroying the global order, and they are dictating their own will as a new norm to the world. And someone needs to stand against this procedure, and Iran is doing that. By fighting this war, Iran is helping not only itself, not only the resistance front, but also the other countries who try to be independent in the world. Part of that could be the global south. Some of them could be considered the BRICS countries. Some of them could be in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So all these alliances, the countries, and the geographies that want to be independent should consider this that this fight was against the tyranny and the hegemony of the Americans. And so they need to consider this. They need to realize that if they don't stand against this hegemony, if they don't support Iran and the Iranian mindset, then the turn would be for themselves. Sooner or later, it would be their own turn to fight this war. And I'm quite sure that most of them would be weaker, and they would not be as strong as Iran has been for the past 2 weeks. Because the Iranian nation is using the spirituality to fight this war. And this spirituality gives more power to the people and to the unity of the people. So other countries should realize this, that this war is not something just between Iran and the Zionist regime or between Iran and the American regime. It is between independent countries represented by Iran and those who, the hegemonic entities like the Israeli regime, the Zionist regime, and the American regime, who want to force the other countries into what they want, and they follow the coercive policy against other countries, and they only want to force everyone to serve their own interests. So Iran is standing against that hegemony, and that benefits every other country who wants to be independent.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh, political commentator, for joining us on this live coverage. And now I'm joined by Gisumi Ahmadiyya, reporter on the ground, as finally the caravan of the Martyrs of Mightiness have arrived in Azadari Square. Gisu, over to you.
Bahman, we finally arrived at the iconic Azadari Square. As you can see behind me, crowds have trickled in from different routes leading to the square. This is the final point. This is where they will bid farewell to the martyrs of the Israeli aggression. And once again, as you can hear, the chants, the very loud chants, louder than ever, of down with the USA and down with Israel, is the most prominent slogan that we have heard today. And even now, as you can see the funeral procession that and the people that have gathered here in Azadari Square, you can see that they're chanting the same slogan. Nothing has changed as far as Iran's stance is concerned with respect to calling out the bullies of the world, those who think that because they have power they can do whatever they want. Now they have the Islamic Republic of Iran standing against them, representing the oppressed people of the world. The people who have come here, Bahman, say that they are not here just to mourn the loss of the martyrs of the Israeli aggression, but they are here to give hope to all the oppressed nations across the world, all of those nations that look up to the Islamic Republic of Iran as the only country in the world that has voiced its support for the voiceless, the only country in the world that has dared to stand up against these aggressors worldwide, particularly the fact that Iran has attacked U.S. bases twice is something that they're very proud of. It shows Iran's military might, according to the people that I've talked to. And they say this is why there is hope for a better world, for a better future for mankind. And they're saying that they are prepared to fight till the very end. And again, another very prominent slogan is that they are standing right behind the leader, the leader of Iran's revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. It's, like I said, very interesting to see this time around. You see people from different backgrounds, different political views, even some that you would not expect to find them here. They are here and they have the picture of Ayatollah Khamenei in their hands, emphasizing and reiterating that they will be standing behind Ayatollah Khamenei till the very end, and they will defend the Islamic Republic of Iran and the values that the Islamic Republic of Iran represents, what it stands for, what it means to the oppressed people of the world. And of course, what they're saying is that the martyrs that you see here and those who have sacrificed their lives, this is the price that should be paid. It's a price that we pay for freedom. It's a price that we pay for a better world, a world free of aggressors, a world free of oppression. And as you can see, these people are still chanting the same slogans right here. Again, as you can see, part of this ceremony is also, in a way, intricately intertwined with the mourning ceremonies of Muharram. It is the second day of the month of Muharram in the Islamic calendar, and a time to remember the heroes of the Battle of Karbala, the martyr of martyrs, Imam Hussein, and his 72 companions who also stood up for what is right. So the fact that these two occasions have coincided has made this ceremony even more significant for Iranians that are taking part. And as I told you before, it is very interesting to see so many people. It is very hot. Actually, it's a hot, scorching summer day in Tehran. And the fact that you see so many people out here on the streets, it has been about 5 hours since people have attended the ceremony. And as you can see, they're still here to take part and to express their support for leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, for the armed forces of the Islamic Republic, for the oppressed people all over the world, saying that they represent them in the fight against world powers, against aggressors, and against oppression.
Thank you, Gisumi Shahmadi, our reporter, for the honest reporting on the ground on this sacred occasion where people have gathered in their tens of thousands to show their support for the people who sacrificed their lives, for the people who were brutally assassinated illegally and unjustly, unfairly by the Israeli regime during the 12-day war. Many of them are going to be buried tomorrow in Tehran, some of them in their hometowns, of course. And with that, we come to the end of this part of our live coverage of these events. I would like to also sincerely thank my own colleague, Maryam Azache, who was with me all morning during this live coverage. And thank you so much for staying with us on Press TV on the right side of history.
اعداد آماده کردن به اندازه استطاعت، یعنی هیچ قانع نباشید به یک حدی، هر چه میتوانید این آمادگی رو بایستی تاکید بکنید و زیاد کنید.
The Israeli missile strikes on Iran in June 2025 were not only an attack on the territory of a sovereign nation, but also a direct assault on the lives of ordinary civilians. According to official figures, more than 200 people were killed and thousands of Iranian non-combatants were injured in the attacks. What made this tragedy even more bitter was the death of several well-known athletes and innocent civilians, individuals who were killed without guilt by Israeli warplanes, drones, and bombs. Among the victims were names that stood for perseverance, hope, and peace. Amirali Amini, a promising young Taekwondo athlete, Nilufar Galavand, a respected Pilates instructor, and Parsa Mansour, a rising star in paddle tennis. These are just some of the 15 athletes whose lives were cut short by Israeli missile blasts at the time this video was produced. This is not the first time Israel has targeted athletes. The history of sports, especially the Olympics, has repeatedly witnessed the brutal killing of Palestinian athletes by Israel time and again. Consider the following names. Nagam Abu Samra, an international karate champion and expected representative for Palestine at the 2024 Summer Olympics, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on her home in the Nuseirat refugee camp. Hani al-Masdar, one of Palestine's most admired footballers and the Olympic team's manager, was killed by shrapnel from an Israeli missile that exploded near his home. These are only a few among thousands of Palestinian athletes who have been brutally killed by Israel. However, in targeting Iranian and Palestinian athletes, the Israeli regime has made no mistake nor accidentally bombed a home. Rather, with complete awareness of the symbolic impact of athletes, it has chosen a form of violence that directly attacks the roots of nations' hope. In this context, the continued silence of international sports institutions and the double standards they apply to Israel can no longer be justified. It is time for the International Olympic Committee, IOC, to take meaningful and urgent action to break the cycle of violence against athletes.
In the early hours of June 13th, an unprovoked and shocking escalation shook West Asia. With the backing of the United States, Israel launched a coordinated assault on Iranian territory, striking residential neighborhoods in Tehran, military facilities, and most provocatively, nuclear sites in Natanz and Isfahan. The attack marked the beginning of a 12-day war that would alter regional geopolitics and leave both aggressors, Israel and the U.S., scrambling to reframe a campaign that failed to meet its strategic goals. The first day was particularly deadly for Iran. Not only did it lose top generals and nuclear scientists, but the country was forced to react while it was on the verge of entering the 6th round of nuclear talks with the U.S. The pretense of diplomacy was shattered by bombs. By nightfall on June 13th, Iran responded with waves of drone and missile strikes targeting Israeli military and intelligence sites deep inside the occupied territories. While American officials initially distanced themselves, claiming Israel had acted independently, their true role became clear when on June 22nd, the U.S. directly struck nuclear facilities in Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo, deploying bunker-busting munitions designed to target Iran's most secure underground enrichment sites. Washington framed this as an effort to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, a claim hollowed by their own intelligence findings and IAEA reports just weeks earlier, confirming Iran had no current weaponization plans. In reality, the dual assault by Israel and the U.S. appeared to have a different goal: regime change. Western media floated the son of the deposed Shah as a government in waiting, complete with a televised day-after plan. Assassinations of key IRGC commanders and pressure on military officers to defect revealed the extent of this ambition. But instead of toppling the Islamic Republic, these efforts sparked a wave of national unity across Iran.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Civilians rallied behind the leader of the revolution, not out of blind loyalty, but because they viewed the attacks as targeting Iran itself, not just its leadership. The scope of Iran's retaliation was devastating and unprecedented. For 12 continuous days, Israeli cities like Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Beersheva were hit repeatedly. The famed Iron Dome was overwhelmed. According to Hebrew media, the financial and infrastructural damage sustained in this short span matched 20 months of war in Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon. A third of Tel Aviv was reportedly in ruins. For the first time in decades, Israeli settlers fled en masse, smuggling themselves out through Cyprus and Egypt as the government restricted departures. Iran suffered serious losses. Over 600 lives, including civilians, military personnel, and nuclear scientists, but paradoxically gained political capital. Its portrayal as a victim of premeditated aggression, particularly as it was preparing for diplomacy, resonated internationally. Russia openly criticized the IAEA's bias and the reckless nature of U.S.-Israeli strikes. Foreign Minister Lavrov underscored how no evidence existed that Iran was preparing to attack Israel, contrary to the narratives pushed in Western capitals. In response to what it deemed as the IAEA's complicity, the Iranian Majlis voted to suspend cooperation with the nuclear watchdog. Inspectors would only be allowed into Iran if the security of nuclear facilities was guaranteed, a prerogative now tightly guarded by Iran's Supreme National Security Council. This marked a significant shift. Iran no longer saw benefit in cooperating with institutions it viewed as compromised. Even more telling was Iran's rapid internal control. Over 700 individuals were arrested for espionage or collaboration with Israel, and a few were executed for smuggling equipment used in assassinations. These actions reflected Iran's belief that the war extended beyond military engagement. It was existential, targeting its sovereignty and survival. Back in Washington, Trump faced political blowback. His decision to attack Iran mid-negotiation and its threats to assassinate Iranian leaders alienated global partners. Iran's retaliatory strike on the U.S. base in Qatar, the largest American base in West Asia, was a direct humiliation. This followed a precedent set in 2020 when Iran bombed al-Assad base in Iraq after Trump's order to assassinate General Qasem Soleimani. Once again, American military might was exposed as vulnerable. Despite his bluster, Trump found himself politically cornered. His approval rating dropped to 41%, with key voters questioning why he reignited conflict when his platform had promised disengagement from wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Simultaneously, Trump attempted to soften his stance, offering prayers for Iran and hinting at a new diplomatic deal. It was a staggering reversal. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu claimed victory, insisting the war had achieved its objectives, decapitating Iran's nuclear program and fostering regime change. But both goals collapsed under scrutiny. The nuclear decapitation failed outright. Iran successfully moved 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium from Fordo before the strikes. The U.S. intelligence assessment later admitted that the operation only set Iran's program back by a few months, contradicting Trump's claims of obliteration. Israeli assessments were even more optimistic, claiming delays of years. Yet, with key facilities intact and materials secured, Iran retains the ability to rebuild and even accelerate its program. Its withdrawal from IAEA cooperation suggests it might do just that. Regime change? Not only did it not occur, but it also backfired spectacularly. The assassinations, rather than demoralizing Iran's elite forces, galvanized public opinion. Even Iranians opposed to the regime found themselves siding with the IRGC, not out of newfound loyalty, but out of patriotic duty. They saw a foreign war against Iran itself. Israel's symbolic attacks on Evin prison, the Doomsday Clock, and the IRIB broadcaster only added to the perception that this was a war to destroy the Iranian nation, not liberate it. The war left Israel isolated, vulnerable, and weakened in regional and global perception. The economic cost was staggering. The myth of Israeli invincibility cracked as Iranian missiles reached deep into its heartland. The famed anti-missile system ran low on interceptors. The military failed to neutralize Iran's retaliation, and Netanyahu's political image suffered, not from lack of aggression, but from strategic failure. In Washington, Trump's credibility took a massive hit. His erratic shift from war threats to peace offers cast doubt on any future negotiations. Allies in Europe privately distanced themselves from U.S. policy, while regional actors in the Persian Gulf grew anxious. Trump did not unite the world behind Israel. If anything, his reckless approach widened divides and hardened opposition. At the core of this war lies a long-standing delusion that external force can impose regime change in Iran or destroy its nuclear capabilities permanently. Israel and the U.S. misread Iran's domestic resilience. They believed that economic strain and internal dissent would translate into regime collapse under military pressure. But history has repeatedly shown that Iranians unite in times of national crisis, from the Iran-Iraq War to the economic war and sanctions era. This latest war only reinforced that pattern. The second failure lies in underestimating Iran's nuclear resilience. Its program is not centralized in one facility, but is widely dispersed, deeply buried, and increasingly indigenous. The relocation of enriched uranium ahead of the strikes showed a level of strategic foresight that eluded both Tel Aviv and Washington. Moreover, Iran's technological capacity means that even severe damage can be repaired and often rebuilt better. Finally, the war proved that military solutions cannot replace diplomacy. Bombs cannot dismantle ideals or erase national will. Iran's response was calculated, precise, and avoided escalation beyond what was necessary. Yet it was devastating enough to shake the very foundations of Israeli and American confidence in their technological dominance. The 12-day war between Iran and Israel, backed by the United States, exposed the limits of military power and the enduring strength of political will. Far from collapsing, Iran emerged bruised but emboldened, internationally vindicated, domestically united, and militarily validated. Israel suffered a psychological and material blow unlike anything in its modern history. The United States, once a hegemon in the region, now finds itself distrusted, its leadership viewed as reckless and inconsistent. As the dust settles and both sides enter a tense pause, one thing is clear. Wars born of hubris rarely achieve their intended outcomes. The pursuit of regime change and the dream of a nuclear-free Iran enforced by force may have finally run their course. What replaces it, diplomacy, deterrence, or further confrontation, will shape the region for years to come.
The people of Iran should know Israel stands with you.
Rien n'est tout de suite. Hello and welcome to Unscripted. I'm Qaseedy. We have the pleasure today of having with us Professor Dr. Udo Steinbach. Now he is from the Mecenate Stiftung Foundation, and he is joining us for the special edition of the program in order to elaborate more on what he does and, of course, what he thinks about different world issues. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's first start with the very interesting name that you have for your foundation, Mecenate Stiftung Foundation. Tell us what that is, and then we'll try to diverge into other areas of political interest here.
The Mecenate Foundation is concerned with philanthropy and civil society in Europe, in Germany, and at a certain point we had the idea to add to the program a Middle East program, dealing with the problems, with the challenges of civil society in the Middle East, and that's why we established the MENA Study Center. And I have been the director of the German Orient of Middle East Studies for many, many decades, and so they made me the director of the new program.
Well, that sounds great. We refer to the Middle East as West Asia. But nevertheless, when you talk about the challenges that exist in West Asia, there are many, just like any other part of the world. What are the areas of focus in the challenging sphere when it comes to West Asia?
I think that the West Asia is in the process of reorganizing itself. It's a global challenge, but a challenge especially for the Middle East as well. So what we see regime changes, we see wars, we see efforts to reorganize the entire region. And we see, of course, that certain countries try to prevail, countries which try to play a new role as a sort of Vormacht. And so there's a rearrangement of powers in the region. And for the time being, it's an ongoing process, but we do not see yet the end of the story.
Well, the political evolution, in a sense, that's happening in West Asia is happening at a rather rapid pace. And one of the reasons behind that is the fact that you have the U.S. in terms of the policies that it's exercising. But you mentioned wars. We're going to get to the evolution aspect of it, but the war itself brings to mind the one that has been going on for the past a year and a half to a year to 7 months. And that is the genocide that's happening in the Gaza Strip. That has impacted the region in a very strong way. Maybe you can give us your understanding of how that stands and why it is that it has not stopped yet and the world has not been able to stop that genocide that's taking place there.
Well, I think that indeed the Gaza war is the most significant feature at the moment. I have been talking about changes, but this is really dramatic. And it does not only affect